Hello there, welcome back to my channel. In today's layout video, I'm really excited to share a scrapbook filled with photos from one of my favorite places, the Portland Japanese Garden. It's nestled in Washington Park in Portland, Oregon, and it's really living artwork. It is filled with culture, design, and nature. And I did not just take a few photos, I took a ton of photos. So the garden is about 12 and a half acres, and it has several different garden styles or spaces, like a pond with koi fish, tea gardens, a sand and stone garden, and natural woodland gardens. And it is amazing. And I have some inside photos of some amazing artwork because I was lucky enough to be there when the Ohara School of Ikehana was there. And so I probably murdered that. I tried my best to really listen how it was said, but there was a visiting master professor and he made the most beautiful artwork. So because I have so many photos and they lend themselves to Kintsugi Inspirations, I'm going to use Kintsugi Inspirations, which is a collection that we've had for a while. I was going to try to use it for prom or something else because it was so gorgeous, but this popped up and it's absolutely perfect. So not only does it contain beautiful DSP that's gold embedded, but part of the collection is the Inspiring Imperfections stamp and die set. So some of the dies cut out icons right out of the designer series paper, but you can also stamp and die lots of other interesting pieces. This collection is so unique, and I love that we have something that is a different take other than florals, and it's so different from anything that we've ever had. It has beautiful gold flower accents as well, and let's just look at this gorgeous designer series paper. It's so crazy how gorgeous it is. And Kintsugi is a really unique suite that was inspired by a centuries-old technique of mending treasured objects with lacquer and gold. So if ceramics had fractures, they would piece it back together with gold embellishment and gold detail. And so you can see all of the colors in the patterns in this, and they are so stunning. Now, in my photos, I do have an awful lot of green, but I literally have 22 photos that I'm going to fit on this layout today. So a lot of times when you go overboard with your photos, but you're not really willing to give any of them up, you have to really fight with how do you get those photos into your layouts, but not lose the design element, to be able to still have something beautiful and unique about it without losing the design element. So I see myself doing most of the outdoor garden photos on the left page and the inside artist collection on the right page. Of course, we're going to make a mini album that's going to be embedded right into the scrapbook page. And if you stay tuned to the end, I'm going to show you how to get it to fit perfectly in your page protector. So we're going to start out with a busy frame. I always like to start out with a pretty busy frame so that I can draw from the colors on the outer edge of the frame. So the designer series paper is 12 by 12, and you're going to cut from 1 inch to 11 inches all the way around to gut the inside piece so that you can use it for something else, and I can draw from all of those colors. Now, there isn't any mossy meadow in this collection, just a little bit of old olive, but because of all the greens from the garden, I'm going to add an 11.5 by 11.5 mossy meadow cardstock frame. I'm also going to gut that interior frame by 1 inch all the way around. Then we're going to grab a couple different patterns. Now, I don't know if this is going to work at this point or not, but I really want the interior blue and gold piece to be lower, at a lower level than the top two pieces, almost like it's sunken in and there's another level. So what I'm going to do here is take the 4.5 by 11 1/4 inch designer series paper, the blue with the gold crackle, and I'm going to put that down from the top of the page about 4 1/8 inches. Then I'm going to pop up the top pink petal pink pattern paper piece that is 3.5 by 11 1/4, and I'm going to pop that up on the top inside that mossy meadow frame. And then the bottom piece is 3.5 by 11 1/4, and I'm going to pop that up on the bottom. I think I said the top was 3.5. It's 3 3/4. So it's 3 3/4 by 11 1/4, and then the bottom is 3.5 by 11 1/4. And I just want that sunken in, and I'm going to bridge that gap with a mini album. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a little bit. I'm going to want it to flip open. Then I'm going to add more vertical photos over on the right. Now, thinking of Japanese gardens, I went to my Cricut and I actually found this mirrored bridge. It was all one piece, and I actually sliced it on the Cricut. You could cut it by hand so that the top upright portion was on the top, and then the bottom flipped over mirrored version is going to go on the bottom, and we will build the mini album in the middle. And I just really wanted to have that little touch of culture in there, and it has the right kinds of trees. I absolutely loved going through and learning about all of the grasses and the trees and the greenery, and they had gorgeous koi fish and a huge walking bridges, and just oversized flora and fauna and trees, and so many things to look at. And when you walk in there, it's just like all your stress goes away. There's a little bit of music. There were quite a few people there, but it was like I didn't notice them. Everyone was just so serene and quiet and taking it all in. Now, I want to take off a little bit of the edge of these Cricut elements. So I've pounced and edged those with pecan pie and dirtied those up just a little bit. And I also have another little walking bridge that I somehow want to incorporate into the right page. Now, the color that I cut this was Night of Navy, and I will link in the description a free design space for these exact files, and I've already sliced out the pieces. Now I wanted to go to the brushed gold, and I can tell you that I do end up going larger than what I start with. So I wanted to make a base for the mini album, and the final answer ends up being 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 of the brushed gold. And then I'm using a blue pattern paper piece here of 4 by 4, and I use it in the wrong spot. And I actually have to cut another one later. So you won't want to cut this or use this when I'm doing this video, because I changed my mind and it actually isn't going to show the way that I use it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm grabbing 4 by 4 signature flip flaps. Flip flaps, as most of you know, especially if you watch my channel or just about any other Stampin' Up! Demonstrator or former Close to My Heart demonstrators channels, they use flip flaps. Flip flaps are amazing photo extenders. You have one side that you peel off the adhesive, and you can fold it over and adhere it to the back of things or directly to page protectors. So I'm actually going to create a mini album that's going to be right on the page, and then we're going to manipulate the page protector by slicing it, and I'll show you an easy way how to make the mini album fit. So what I've done is I've attached a flip flap on each of the 4 sides, and I'm going to actually attach it to my 4 by 4 blue piece, and then later on I'm going to need another one of those blue pieces, so I really could have just simply used white or a different color at this point. because it's going to end up being covered up. So each flip flap gives you 2 more photo opportunities. And so I'm just experimenting. That's 2, 4, 6, 8 photos plus a center that can either be a photo or a journal spot. Now I actually am going to double this. Now you don't have to double this. By doubling it, it will make the mini album sit at about a ½ inch. So if you do not want ½ inch thickness in your page protector, then you can just stop there. But I'm actually going to double it because I don't mind the bulk at all. And the mini album is going to have a Velcroed belly band, and it's going to stay shut, and it's going to come out on the outside of the page protector. So you can either stop here with 8 photos, or you can get 16 photos on the left page. So what I've done is with that second layer, I've come in to the top. Okay, so once I added all the flip flaps to the base, then I've come back in and I'm going to reduplicate that with that additional journaling piece. So here's where I realize that I actually needed that blue piece at the top. And so I've added that blue pattern, and it's kind of a little bit of a speckled, kind of florally speckled pattern. And then I've journaled on about 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 piece of willow white, opened it up in a Word document, and I've journaled on that. And because I have that, I can either attach these secondary flip flaps to that journal piece or to the 4x4 blue piece on the back that we're attaching. And so we're just going to do a double layer. And it is sometimes hard when you're watching someone do flip flaps. Until you peel the strip, you'll get it. The second you peel the strip, you'll get it. And you just want to line up, put your photos inside, line up your photos with the photos underneath, and then fold the top under. And then you can also do a little trimming on those edges if you want to. You can trim off a little bit of the adhesive if you want to. When I get done with my mini album, I actually realized that my flip flop on the left side, I should have moved it out just a little bit more because it's pretty tight at the top and it doesn't line up absolutely perfect. It doesn't bother me once the belly band is in place, but if you're having it sit there without the belly band, the top layer is going to be just a titch off and it's not lined up perfectly. But by adjusting those adhesive flaps by just a titch here or there, you're able to get it so that they line up perfectly. So now I've grabbed that brushed gold again, and I've created a 1.5 inch by 12 inch strip. And I actually see myself decorating the front of that belly band. But before I get my mini album in place, I need some tie strings. So we have a couple different options. We have some gorgeous gold mesh ribbon. We also have, I don't know if it's still available or not, but in my stash, I have some SU gold twine. And I do end up going with the gold twine. And initially I put 1 thread underneath, and then I go back and I do 3 threads, and they're way longer than they need to be, but I just wasn't sure how much I was going to need. So when I'm adhering my little flip flap mini album, I'm going to want to use some heavy duty score tape, but right now I just have very little adhesive on it because I'm going to be pulling it back up at the end of the video because I'm going to be cutting my page protector and I want the album out of there while I cut the page protector. So it's going to look a little wonky just sitting over there. We're going to be doing some embellishing, some decorating, but let's go ahead and move on to the right side. So I have that same pattern paper and I've cut it to 12 inches to go the whole length of the layout, and it's 4 1/4 by 12, and then I've cut 2 additional 1/2 by 12 inch brushed gold foil pieces. I've added little mini dimensionals in the center of those strips, because if you remember, I wanted that mini album to bridge the gap between the two bridges, the mirrored bridge and the regular bridge, and I wanted it to sink down a little bit. Now that's 1000% personal preference. I just love that look and that dimension, that there's a whole nother layer of this beautiful cracked pattern underneath. So once I get those gold mesh pieces in place, I can begin working on the flip flaps on the right side. So I'm going to have 2 stacks of 4x4 photos. And then I'm actually going to have a willow white piece that is 3.5 by 4.25. So I'm going to have 2 4.25 by 4.25 willow white pieces with photos on them, then 2 more 4.25 by 4.25 willow white pieces with photos on them, because my photos are smaller than a 4x4. So I do need that white edge inside the flip flap. So then I'm going to adhere the flip flap underneath those, and then I get 3 photo opportunities for each of those 4x4 squares. So 16 photo opportunities in the mini album on the left, and 3 and 6, so 22 photo opportunities all together. So I've added that little walking bridge to the 3.5 by 4.25 willow white piece on the bottom. I've cut out some vases, some teacups, and some florals using those dies that come right in the collection. And then I cut 2 additional brush gold fans from the Cricut, and I've added them to the top of some pattern paper, and I've fussy cut around. So now I want to decorate my belly band. I've added a couple foam dimensionals on the back of the fan. And then I'm going to add a tall vase for some height. I'm going to add one of the teacups, and then probably the florals. And as an afterthought, there's some other die cut florals. I think they're supposed to be cherry blossoms, because of course cherry blossoms are a very big deal in the Japanese culture. And I am going to actually cut those in gold as a little bit of ornamental gold. There are lots of things that I saw that had little ornamental gold accents in the Japanese gardens. These Japanese gardens are 12.5 acres, and I believe that I read that they are the largest outside of Japan, like in the United States. And I loved that they had so many different garden styles, and it was just so calming and so peaceful and so beautiful. So now I've added those little pieces of embellishments to the front with the belly band. My photos are still just a little bit off, so I'll be correcting those here in just a little bit, so my mini album is a little bit more tighter and a little bit more even with that belly band. And right now I just have a glue dot under there, and I'm actually going to add some Velcro to that when I get it finally placed. So I'm going to add a visual triangle. I'm not going too overboard here. I think less is more with this, with all the gold accents and the crackle and the patterns. I don't think that we need a lot. So I'm going to do another Cricut fan, a couple tall vases, another teacup, and a couple of those florals that we cut right out of the pattern paper. So next I'm going to work on the upper right, so we have a little bit of a visual triangle, and then I still need a title. And I think I'm going to pull a little bit of gold splatter from my stash. I have a leftover close to my heart gold shimmer brush, which I think you can use Wink of Stella. You could probably add some gold to that if you wanted to, but I'm just going to add 2 more tall vases, a teacup, and some florals to that. And then I'm I'm going to go cut some of those cherry blossoms, several sets of those. There's like a little small set in the Inspiring Imperfection Stamp and Die set, and then there's a bigger set. And I just want to add that as ornamental gold, just like a sprig. And what was really neat about all the different arrangements is we got to learn about all of the culture and the trees and the nature and some of the traditions. And so they had, I believe it was 4 different types of gardens. So they have sand and stone gardens, tea gardens, pond gardens. So they had beautiful koi fish, which of course is one of my favorites, and natural woodland gardens. And I think it was designed like in 1960. They even had a real live tea house that was built in Japan, and then they reassembled it in the garden. It was so cool. So what I've done is I've taken Night of Navy and I stamped You Inspire Me. It might seem like a weird title, but these gardens inspired me, and this artist that I saw his displays completely inspired me. And just the whole day and how peaceful it was, I was completely inspired. So I splattered that a little bit with the gold shimmer brush, and now I'm adding those flower accents, and I think it's going to be just enough. We're going to check it out here, and we'll open up the album and we'll get that a little bit tightened up with the Velcro, and then we'll see about getting that to fit in the page protector, but we'll do a full swoop of the layout first. I am loving it. I can't believe that I have 22 photos on this and the layout is not overpowered. It has a few of those beautiful broken designs and so many photos of that peaceful day in the gardens. I actually went to Portland, actually outside of Portland, about 40 minutes for a funeral. And while I was there, I was such a quick trip. I just had to go for a funeral, but I'm like, I flew all the way. So I just did a couple stops at some waterfalls and these beautiful gardens. And I also saw the Portland Rose Gardens. And so this was just a highlight in addition to honoring my family member that passed and celebrating her life. But I think it's beautiful. And even though it has the large mini album in it, it's still understated. A few ornamental elements here and there to represent those Japanese gardens, and I really, really love it. So now let's hang out a second and I'll quickly show you how you can operate with a thicker mini album and still have your page protected. So what I like to do first is I take my bulk out. That's why I didn't put the mini album down all the way and it looked a little wonky, but I'm going to figure out which direction my page protector is going to go. So since it's a 2-page layout, the clip portion of the page protector is going to be in toward the right hand side of the layout. So I'm going to get it all the way in the layout, and you could use a ruler for this, but I literally am a-okay taking a pen all the way around the square that I need to be open. So I want just the part that needs to pop through to be open. The photos are protected because they're in flip-flaps. So even though the mini album will stick out of the page protector, the photos are still protected because of the memory protector flip-flaps. So now I'm just actually, you can use an X-Acto knife. I'm actually just using the edge of my scissor, and I put a small cutting board inside. If you have a self-healing mat or anything like that, you just put it underneath, and I probably didn't push hard enough, so I have to go back around and snip a little bit, but it's very easy to do. I barely run my scissors along there, and because I have most of it cut, it's just cutting very easily, but if you used an X-Acto knife or pressed just a little bit harder, I do think that the self-healing mat works works a little bit better than a cutting board because it's so smooth. So if you have one that will fit inside the page protector, also, I don't know how many of you use like the self-healing from Pampered Chef. They're like little where you roll out your dough, or it's a cutting board, but it's a really thin cutting board, and they have all sizes. Those work really, really well. So now I have an opening. So here is where I would put double-sided tape, or I would put really sturdy tape to keep that mini album in place. So that mini album is going to pop up about a 1/2 inch. So if you don't like that dimension, definitely use less photos or flip flaps. I'm so excited to be able to use Kintsugi Inspirations, and I'm excited to use it for more events. And I'm also happy that I was able to honor the gorgeous Japanese gardens. I really hope you loved today's layout and today's tips. I hope you'll hit like, subscribe, the notifications bell, shoot me a comment and let me know your thoughts, and come back soon for more right here on Snips by Kelly. Happy scrapping, everyone.